happening, guys? Welcome back to Nutrition Radio. The laughs you're hearing are Tony and Des making fun of me.
Oh,
you deserve it, dude. I love you. Shut up.
Man, fucking me. Well, but the reason for this is in the beginning of this conversation is because me and Desi, we got to see each other in Arizona very recently when I went over there. He did the drive from Tucson to Sedona, so it was a great time there. But I, as a human that I am, not a robot and not a perfectionist when it comes down to nutrition.
Lies. He's a robot.
I decided to. We went on a hike to, what was it called, Desi? What's it?
Devil's Bridge.
Devil's Bridge, and and we literally drove there and we started walking and we brought no water. And no water. It was like, it's only like an hour hike. It's not that big of a deal. It ended up being like a 2.5-hour hike or more.
Yeah.
And then like you could see
in the heat of the day too.
Yeah, and it was 12 o'clock in the middle of the day.
Stupid.
115 degrees. And I'm like going up, and then you could see signs like, make sure you carry at least a gallon of water. And like there were like sign after sign after sign after sign, and we're like, we'll be fine. Well, Desi did bring in like a little small, like it was like what, like probably like 25 ounces.
I don't even think it was that. It was like 18.
Yeah, which
like, what is this? It was my wife. It was my wife's Starbucks little bottle, and I was like, God, this sucks.
Well. Interesting to say also that he didn't share any of the water with us.
Yo, real talk, I did not even know that you guys didn't have water until we sat down waiting in line to take those pictures. And I was like, holy crap. I've been bitching about this water this whole way up here. You guys don't have any.
Yeah, none at all. So anyways, long story short, on the way back, I was quiet. I was mad. I was upset. And I think it was a result of dehydration. Literally, I had a headache. I felt terrible. Like I didn't really
sassy.
I was just didn't want to talk to anybody. Like, and I was like, no. So it gave me a really good taste of what like mild to, I wouldn't call it severe, but mild dehydration really means.
Yeah, mild to moderate a little bit. Yeah,
mild to moderate dehydration, what it really means. I didn't really actually go to the bathroom until like for like another 6 hours, even after consuming. Well, even after consuming, like when we got to a restaurant, like after consuming like a crazy amount of water, like I still like barely went to the bathroom.
And the liquid IV too.
Yeah, so that obviously kind of speaks with the fact that, you know, dehydration is a real thing. But just thought I'd share that story with the dehydration, the hydration master here. So
come on, guys, you know better. You both know better. I'm upset at you guys. Hydrate or dihydrate, literally.
Yeah.
You know what makes this better is we also didn't put on sunscreen. Heat of the day.
Vitamin D.
Yeah.
Dude, I told you, man. I had the vitamin D app, and there was one day in Phoenix when I was with the ball team. I looked at like, how much sunlight do I need today? And it was like, if you're here past 15 minutes, like you're at a toxic level of UV rays. It's like, all right, well, I'm out of here.
Wait, what's this vitamin D app you're talking about?
All right. So I came across this. Oh man, the biohacker dude. Why is his name escaping my mind? We talked about him. Ben,
just for those watching, he is drinking water. For those listening.
Drinking water. A big so the coaching program I'm on right now, like he's huge. Like Alex Charfin, shout out to him. He's huge into hydration. And literally sent out this.
I do like that water bottle,
dude, and it's awesome. I drink more water out of this because number one, it keeps it cooler. And again, this is not sponsored. I don't even know what brand this is. It's called Best for You, I guess. But like it's 40 ounces and it's super cool because like I just drink literally yesterday I had 4 of these. So that means I had like probably a gallon, almost like 160 ounces just yesterday. So, which never happens, but yeah.
It looks like a dope water bottle. I would drink out of it too.
Yeah.
Maybe your hydration will do better, your recovery.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
So it's called D-Minder Pro.
D-Minder Pro.
Yeah. Peep it.
So he tells
really
you like how the sun rays are hitting on a specific time of the day. And
yeah, exactly. Like,
to it.
Yeah. Approximate exposure to vitamin D. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I have not looked at it since I stopped working with the guys though, but it'd be nice to resurface now that it's not as hot.
Well, we definitely got our dose of vitamin D that day. Let's just put it that way.
For the year, yeah, 100%. And also skin cancer, so shut up.
Anyways, well, we don't have a whole lot of planned things like for today, but I do think like, one of the topics that we discussed last time that was something highly searched was calorie deficit and how to get
Mhm.
into a calorie deficit. So, let's talk about it.
So I think one of the things we should talk about is let's start with like, why would someone get into a calorie deficit? What are they, you know?
Well, yeah, I think from the thermodynamic standpoint, when it comes down to like weight loss and fat loss, what science says is that if there's a specific amount of energy your body is expending on a daily basis, and we split that up into your basal metabolic rate, which is like the amount of like energy calories. So calorie is a form of it's a unit of measurement of energy. It's technically the definition is like the amount of energy that is required to raise the temperature of water by 1 degree Celsius. But of course, like when you tell somebody that, they're like, what does that have to do with the amount of food that I consume? So I'm not even going to get into that. But essentially, calories are a unit of measurements. Now, your body is using calories on a daily basis for basic bodily functions, like your heart to beat, like your hands to move, your eyes to actually kind of like your eyelids to actually kind of open and close, and all those different things. So all those different things are part of like what we call basic metabolic rate. Now, those are not the only calories your body requires, but there's also things like movement, and there are things like the energy required for exercise and the energy required for digestion and all these different things. So in order for people to so they understand like all that stuff makes up the amount of total calories your body is using on a daily basis. Now, calorie consume is food that you take in, or drinks, or beverages or whatever. So from the weight loss standpoint, when you consume less than what you expend, you're creating a calorie deficit. Some people think calorie deficit is another diet. It's not. It's the process of bringing your calories below a point that is less than what your body's using. That's the
Yeah.
definition that I have.
Yeah, you're definitely right, and because even it's really prevalent. I'm glad we talked about it, our last podcast, with it being so highly searched, because it's rampant on TikTok right now. Like that's just thing. Like you have a bunch of fitness professionals that are like, this is the way you do this calorie deficit, and so I've had clients and different people ask, because they do think it's another diet. They do think that it is something different that they have not learned about. So I would absolutely agree with that on this.
And I think there's different ways to practice it. And I think that's what the great thing about all of us, how we teach calorie deficit in a sense, right? So it can be very tool-based, right? So we're talking about like using a MyFitnessPal or a calorie counter to ensure you are in a calorie deficit, right? And I think it's important to talk about, because I know you guys do really good jobs. And I know, Andres, you have a lot of videos of like weighing things out and showing people like a tablespoon of peanut butter versus how much is a tablespoon of peanut butter in grams, and how much you're actually serving yourself, and why you may think you're in a calorie deficit when you actually are in a calorie maintenance or surplus.
Yeah. And I think it's like you're saying, and one of the parts of it that I usually try to explain to everybody is like every single diet that anybody's ever done, it's always following the same principle, which is calorie deficit, because they all create that. They're all designed to do that. The problem is like they don't ever call it that. When you're jumping into where there's like, a paleo diet, a Mediterranean diet, the fact of the matter is that you're consuming specific foods that are just simply going to fill you up. So you're going to consume less calories that your body's kind of like, like burning on a daily basis, right? So you're creating a calorie deficit through a specific dietary approach. When you practice intermittent fasting, like it's the fact that you're cutting out the calories that you were typically consuming for breakfast and for like your mid-morning snack, if that was the case, you are already kind of cutting out those calories. So you're already creating a calorie deficit. So for purposes of fat loss and weight loss, there's many different ways that you can create that. And it depends on what you can adhere to at the end of the day. So that's kind of like the main thing. So when people ask like, well, because like literally one of the most searched like things like, recently in the past like 3 to 4 months has been like, how do I get into a calorie deficit? Well, I usually ask the simple question to some of my clients is like, do you want to eat less or you want to move more? And a lot of times it's a lot more than that, of course, because but it really depends on the person. So most of them are going to say like, oh, I don't want to eat less. Like I like my food in some cases. Other times it's like, no, I don't care. Like I just prefer, like, I don't like to exercise and stuff like that. So we just obviously need to kind of find a happier place on there. But it all comes down to, like, creating a good balance. Again, it's a lot more intricate than that, but that's just obviously the basic premise behind it. So that's kind of like how I teach it in some ways. But obviously we can kind of like dive deeper into this, but that's just obviously the basic, kind of understanding that of how people can get into it.
Yeah, and I think that stuff is important too. I ask similar questions because what I'll tell a lot of my clients is it's going to be a whole lot easier for me to motivate you and encourage you to move more than it is for me to take food away. And in most cases, they're behind that. They're behind the fact like, okay, well, I can include all foods again. I can teach myself a bit more about food quality, and then I can teach myself sustainable practices of movement. Things outside of activity. Also the type of strength and conditioning. And so there's a lot of things that I like to help them understand where it's like, hey, it's going to be a whole lot easier for me to get you moving than it is for me to take away food, which I'll sign up for that any day. I don't want you to take away my food.
And I think that leads into even more of, because as you guys both know, I do behavior, right? So what I like to teach is, how can we include more veggies on your plate? So not taking any food away, how can we just add more food? Right? Because that's going to lead into that volume counter, which I know something we all teach about, which our stomachs aren't calorie counters. So you can't base your calorie deficit on your stomach feelings, but our stomach is a volume counter. So you can eat things that will fill you up, such as vegetables, popcorn, all these things that will help assist in what we're looking to achieve in that calorie deficit goal. So if we go into the eat less, move more, when doesn't that work? Because I think that we're saying it works, because most of the time it does, but there are some factors that come into play when a calorie deficit is not warranted and shouldn't be done, and when it doesn't work.
So yeah, that's a great point, because
both sides, right?
Yeah, because I think, because that's the thing too. Like there's some people that just kind of say like, like it's just as simple as like eating less and moving more. And again, as I said earlier, it's the basic premise. The problem is everybody has a different background. Everybody comes from different places. So somebody that has been chronically dieting for a while, and for that person to tell them like, oh, like I've been struggling to lose weight, well, just eat less and move more. Well, you don't know what that person is probably kind of going through. Like maybe they have been kind of like pushing 1,200 calories every day, but then obviously the weekends come and then they just like completely lose it. And then they're just kind of pushing 2,000 to 3,000 calories, which is a very common thing. They're just not aware of that. So that's obviously the reason why it is. So when you say like eat less, then they automatically think of the week. And then they say, you know what, I'm just going to go from 1,200 calories to 1,000 calories. Right. So it just kind of creates this kind of momentum. So whenever we do on our clients and our programs, like macro tracking, like they start to feel like I'm eating so much more food. It's like, no, you're not eating much more food. Number one, you're eating more volume. And number two, you're eating more consistently, because what you were doing on the weekends or some other kind of cases when you lost control, like that's something you never paid attention to. You only kind of paid attention to, oh, I need to restart my diet on Monday. I need to restart to actually like,
we heard that
all the time, right? So, and then there's a diet mentality versus like, I'm just not even going to kind of like pay attention. I was having a conversation yesterday with one of my clients, which is just like, I felt like, I was stressed. I was like, I felt like I was binging. I was eating way much more. And I was actually so shameful and guilty about the fact that I was doing that I didn't even want to track or put in my calories, because I feel like so ashamed of how many calories I was consuming. I was like, well, now you're tracking. So obviously that's helping you create awareness. But imagine if that wasn't even the case. You were just kind of like, okay, like you just completely omit it because you just don't want to accept the fact that you a lot more calories. And then you go back the next day and you're like, I'm going to restrict myself. So I think when it comes down to like eat less, move more, it's a lot more than that, because it needs to be dependent on where you're starting and what does that mean to you to eat less consistently and to move more consistently.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that thing right there is a big thing, because I heard this association the other day, and I was thinking about it, having worked with clients that I'm working with now and also clients who have struggled with eating disorders. And it's totally true. It's like for someone who doesn't have a great relationship with food, telling them to eat less and to move more is like telling a depressed person, just be happy. And that really resonated with me.
It's not that
you know
easy.
What? I mean?
What?
And it's funny too because
just be happy, man.
Yeah. I mean, we're all content creators too. I mean, the other day I was working with my social media person, and she was like, "All right, we want quick hits, quick 15 seconds for TikTok." And so calories in, calories out got brought up. And as I tried to run through it in a quick 15 seconds, I was like, there's so much that goes into this. And so when I posted it, I got annihilated by a bunch of like fitness people that are like, you're denying the law of thermodynamics. And I was like, all right, hold on. 100%. I will be accountable. I was not clear. It's a short 15 seconds to try to explain everything that I just went through. But it's the same thing. When we're talking about calorie deficits and calories in, calories out, we can't not talk about the details. We can't not talk about people's relationship with food, their food environment, their habits. Like, we can't not talk about that because it's harmful. It's harmful in most cases.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also, I'll give you an example. So like one of the things that I've been trying to do personally here at our house. So we realize every so often that we kind of like try to do a quick sort of overview of how we're eating and the food choices that we're making. And one of the things I realized, like by the time that I kind of went on this vacation, was that we were relying on a lot of like quick things, on a lot of like convenient things, whether they were like, and granted, these are considered like in some ways, like, quote unquote healthy foods, right? So like protein bars and like cereal, and not necessarily saying that these are bad things, but I was actually relying on more on those things and actually getting a lot more whole grains and a lot more vegetables and a lot more things like that. So I like talked to GB like last week, and I said, like, you know what, like I want to really kind of live up to that 80-20 rule that I kind of try to establish for a lot of our clients, which is, 80% of obviously things are coming from whole grains, fruits, vegetables, like lean meats, all different things like that. And then the other 20% to more like fun foods, but even like ultra processed options like that. Not necessarily they're bad, but they're easy to overconsume them. So I was like, you know what, let's go back to, because I feel like in my mind, when I was kind of like doing the count, I was like, I think I'm on like 60-40, 50-50. So I was like, let's add more vegetables, more variety, more options like this, more potatoes, more things like this that we feel like I haven't really kind of been including as much of, and see how things go. And interestingly enough, and we were having this conversation yesterday, because we've been doing that for a week, not a diet, not nothing, just simply adding more wholesome foods. And I track my macros and I track my calories. I struggled to get on.
I was about to ask you that. That was a question I had in my head. Knowing that you count, how has it been?
I struggled. Like, I think on Monday, like I still had like closer to 300 to 400 calories to consume. And it was like, I worked out, I did everything, and I was like, I'm stuffed. Now, like, that was interesting to me because, okay, this is important lessons. Number one, I intermittent fast because I like it. It's my lifestyle. Like, I like to be focused on taking notes. This is some things.
Well, you said listen, so hold on, let me get my notepad out.
I was talking to the audience.
Everyone.
Sassy man speaks. Everyone shut up and listen to him.
Oh, did I interrupt for you and I didn't even notice?
Oh man, I love you. We're just giving you shit. Go ahead.
Am I good?
Yeah, go.
But seriously,
I'll be here all night, folks.
What
I realized was, so I intermittent fast just because of my lifestyle. I like it. I don't do it for weight loss. I just simply think it just works better for me. But I realized that when I am eating this way, it is difficult for me to get enough intake, like, on a daily basis when I'm even consuming. And again, granted, this is not just like paleo-ish, like, like nothing like that comes in a packet or whatever. No, I still kind of like consume like whole grain bread and I still kind of consume things like cheese and stuff like that. But then more like focus is put towards like, again, more wholesome options. And it was difficult for me to get enough like food and all those different things. So even just that, I was creating a calorie deficit without me even trying. Right? Because I was adding a lot more, like, again, vegetables and filling on my plate. Like last night we had like GB made like this pasta made out of like butternut squash. Mm-hmm. Like I was stuffed. Like I couldn't, like, for the love of anything, I couldn't get enough food. And like literally that was a very low calorie meal. So again, like these are like the hacks and ways that, for example, for like you told me that you do behavioral coaching, like, hey, like replace one day instead of doing like white pasta, try to make some butternut squash pasta and like with like some ground turkey and see how you feel. You already kind of cut out like 100 grams of carbs or like, 400 calories that you were getting from the pasta, now putting into, not necessarily saying that that's bad, but then saying like you kind of like made the substitution, you cut out 400 calories from what you were saying. Like some other people, they drink soda, cutting out one soda every single day, like of the regular one, and then maybe even substituting, even like making a jump to like a diet soda for like the time being at the beginning. Like that's already cutting what? Like I don't know how many, like I forgot, like what?
240?
240. So 240 calories on a daily basis. That's adding
120, up. Something like that.
Now
I'm going to look it
like
up. It's been so long that we haven't had soda.
Yeah, I never was a soda drinker, man.
No?
Ever. Like I think
in my family we did, but
yeah,
my family we did, but it wasn't really like we just had like a 2-liter at home, and then like we would just drink like, I don't know, sometimes with dinner, sometimes we didn't, like it really depends on that. But
what is it?
I put in everything 150, 140 calories, 140. I was off.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I've worked with clients that started like they were actually doing 3 a day, like cutting it out to 2, like, or cutting it out to 1. You already kind of like, you are creating a calorie deficit already. Granted, maybe not a calorie deficit, but you're consuming less calories than you were doing before. So
just to clarify on this, when you're tracking macros at this moment, are you trying to gain weight, maintain weight, or lose weight? Maintain. So just to clarify for everyone, right? Because saying that it struggled to hit that 300 to 400 calories, someone may be trying this at home and think, oh, why am I not getting the same results as Andres? We're all different people. So let's also reiterate that as many times as we have. But yeah, like as you said, when I was in college, I did clean eating, right? One of those fad diets that we hear about that's still stuck around. And it is about focusing on whole foods, right? And I lost a lot of weight, most likely not most likely, 100%, because I was in a calorie deficit, but because I was choosing more of those options. But I had a bad mentality around it because I wouldn't even eat with my friends or go out, or I would have like a cheat day where I'd spend the whole day eating food that wasn't perceived as clean, right? So it kind of goes down that rabbit hole as well. But I agree with you 100%, like trying to bring in more whole foods, vegetables. I had a client the other day. He's like, I'm not really a fan of drinking water. And I'm like, how could you say that to Captain Hydrate? No.
And we're done.
Yeah. I was like, well, what can you add to your water bottle? And I mentioned a slice of an orange. And he's like, oh, my doctor said I can't do that. And I said, why? He's like, because oranges is the most sugary fruit there is. And I said to him, I promise you, fruits and vegetables are not the reason for the obesity epidemic. Fruits and vegetables are not the reason why. And it's like one orange slice in your water is not going to make you gain weight or spike your sugars through the roof. It's literally an orange slice, right? And it's got fiber in it. But going on to this whole calorie deficit, what if you do have a lot of added beverages? So I'm thinking like coffees, right? How many times do we talk to someone that goes to Starbucks and the PSL is about to come out, right? Holla at your boy, get them PSLs in. But if you're someone that goes in for breakfast and that afternoon lunch and you're getting 2 coffees, 2 venti PSLs, which could, I want to say they're above 500 calories, right? You just added 1,000 calories in one day in just a beverage.
What is a PSL again?
Pumpkin spice latte. I just got to that. I didn't know what it was either. I was like, the PSL,
Sorry,
fall. Like, dude, I got it.
I'm not basic.
You guys are not basic enough. Wow.
I'm not basic enough.
Wow.
Well, I think you're just really basic giving it an acronym. Yeah, TC, like, I think you're probably just the basic B word right now.
PC getting PCLs, PSLs.
PSL. I was like, isn't that a moving company? I don't know.
But in all reality, though, I think I talked about somebody like about what the term hyper palatable foods are and really what it means. And I said, listen, like, what if, like, let's say you have an addiction, like I wouldn't even call it addiction, but like, you love your chips, right? So I'm going to give you a kind of like idea here. Like, what if you like potato chips, right? So if I give you a bag of Lay's and I give it to you, and like this individual ones, and I give it to you, and you have the full thing. Like, could you have a second like bag? And she was like, for sure. Like, one thing is just always not enough. It's not going to fill me up. So like now if I give you an actual baked potato and I gave it to you and I said, have this, like chop it up and have the full thing, how would you think you would feel? It's like probably full. Like, can you think about a time you had like a baked potato and you actually feel like, oh, I want to have a second baked potato? Probably not.
That's a great conversation, man.
Well,
really
it is.
It was like, well, that's true. So you're having the same exact food but then one of them has been put through rigorous processing to turn it into what it is.
Two baked potatoes.
TC making notes in there. So you're putting it through obviously like that entire like super highly processing kind of like, or heavy processing. And then obviously it just makes it easier for you to be able to consume, literally, because like you chew onto it and it's just, it's hyper palatable. You can have tons of it because a company is not focused on the health of it. It's just more focused on the bottom line, which is obviously how much it can sell. So same thing applies to like a corn chips, like if I give you an euro corn,
ESL.
Same thing. So it's like really how you're consuming your calories that make a massive difference.
Pumpkin spice latte, guys. Get into the basic bitches lifestyle. Okay.
I'm not down.
But going back to calorie deficit, so we have all these apps like Noom, MyFitnessPal, Lose It. Those are the top 3 that come to my mind. If someone downloads it today and they start using it, what can we recommend as dietitians that will help them on the journey? Because I know I use MyFitnessPal and it's telling me to eat 1,800 calories. I know I eat way more than that, and I did lose the weight, but I also broke my foot because I was under fueling. What are y'all's tips when it comes to those kind of things? Like someone downloads it and tells me I need to eat 1,200 calories. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I mean, I was just like what I have done in the past, especially if you're going to go on a tracking route, and then that's what you feel like, you want to use numbers and data to be able to understand how you create awareness. I actually don't. First of all, I don't ever recommend anybody to follow what like an app recommends to you because it's just too generic, right? The thing that I prefer for people to do is like, okay, like don't change a thing in your diet, but track everything you do for 7 days to understand your average. Now, don't lie to yourself. Make sure that you like literally like, because like, well, like I think I saw a recent study, like, I don't know, closer to 20 to 50 something % of people actually, when they're asked what they eat, they underreport what they eat. So they either forget or they just choose not to actually disclose it. So
and they overestimate what they do in activity.
Exactly. That's a typical thing that happens. So don't lie to yourself. What I mean by that is like log everything. Again, like you're only lying to yourself if you choose not to kind of like log something because you just kind of feel shameful that, oh, like that was just too many calories. No, just simply do it honestly for like 7 days. Understand the average of calories that you're consuming and to see what it is. And it could be as simple, when you ask the question, how to create a calorie deficit, it's just consuming and doing it the same thing, and repeating it the next week, but you're just trying to obviously get that number to go maybe 100 to 200 lower than the number what it was in the previous week. So now you're not actually basing things off on or on a calculator or whatever it is. You're basing it off what your typical average is. That could be an easy start for somebody that has absolutely no clue where they're at right now.
I think that's a great tip. And one thing I want to just kind of state that you both said. One, Andres, you said most people underestimate. So most people think they eat less. Two, Dezi, you said most people overestimate what they do. So most people think they eat less and move more. And for some reason, it's not working.
Yeah.
So I think what Andres said is good. Now, what about from like a physical activity standpoint? Well, Dezi, you were going to say something. I apologize.
No, I was just going to affirm that too. I think I do something very similar. I will take a little bit of like TC, the behavioral approach that you take, right? The athlete's plate. I'll teach them how to balance their plate, and then I'll tag them into starting to bring about more awareness and more specificity with tracking. But I'll have them do it like either Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, so that they allow themselves some residual awareness in between those days, so they can start practicing balancing their plate. It's very seldom that anyone that's ever jumped in my program that they'll track all 7 days, because you get burnt the F out like really fast. So it's like, hey, what are some ways in which this can be for not longevity, but a little bit longer, a more sustainable practice? So yeah, it's that process is hard, but I absolutely agree with what Andres said.
Yeah. It's a realistic way to do it. Now, how, well, this is obviously us, we do tracking, but then you, Tony, you don't. So how would you recommend somebody to go about this when it comes down to like when you're actually kind of taking calories out of the equation, and somebody's just kind of starting off, like how do you get them to create that calorie deficit when you kind of start to give them the specific pointers and specific kind of like action items?
So the one thing I do, which I'm sure we all do, I do a 24-hour recall. I ask them, what have you eaten in the past day? So they kind of tell me what they've eaten, and then I repeat it to them, right, to ensure I heard them correctly and for them to actually think about, is that actually what I ate? Because sometimes when I ask them, they start to remember other things they ate, because as we stated, we don't remember. I mean, if you ask me, I'd have to really think about it. So I ask them what they typically eat, and I try to make one minor adjustment. Is it breakfast? Is it lunch? Is it dinner? Is it a snack? And out of those things, I either include breakfast, or I see a way we can include protein at breakfast, right? How can we include more vegetables at lunch or more vegetables at dinner? Whatever works for that person for that week. And that's all we focus on. Instead of looking at every meal and everything. For example, a lot of people I see, they have more control over dinner than lunch, because lunch, they just go out. They're not going to be in control of it. It's just something that's super easy. They want something quick, easy, and fast. And for them, it's easier to control dinner. I'm like, all right, so how can we add more veggies? Is it you going to buy the steamable bags in the freezer aisle? Is it adding salad? Is it having prepped veggies? How can we just add more veggies to your dinner? And that's how they get into that calorie deficit, because now on their plate, they typically, instead of having, and I saw this the other day, a picture of someone's balanced plate. And this was on Instagram, the hashtag balanced plate. This person had French fries, and a 12-inch sub from Subway with meatballs. And I was like, how is that a balanced plate? And they said, because I had lean meat from the meatballs, which we all know on this plate is not correct. When we think of that, so what I would do with that person is, all right, well, if you want the whole sub, that's fine, but how can we change the fries to greens? Or if they want the fries, how can we change it from a full sub to half a sub and get you some greens in to kind of exchange what you're doing there? So that's what I'd look at. What is one area that we can change in order for them to meet their goals?
Yeah, that's a pretty
calorie
good
deficit.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. And I think with the thing with the 24-hour recall, I think like sometimes I don't know if it's happened to you guys, but for some reason, when people kind of have this idea that they're going to start something new, they completely like, they're just kind of like in a way that's like, okay, I'm saying bye to all this. So I'm just going to like completely lose it. Sometimes like when I ask those questions specifically when I'm having a conversation with them, it's like, okay, like, is this representative of what you typically do on a daily basis? It's like, no, actually, no. I remember a client literally went and had 3 Big Macs the night before she actually went to meet with me. And she actually accepted the fact that, that's what she did, because she had that mentality. Like, it's like, I'm going to start a diet, so I need to say bye to all these foods. And many people actually kind of like start to continue to experiment. I have a client whose husband literally said, like, I'm just going to have this entire bag. I planned for this. I'm going to have this entire bag of Doritos because I'm saying bye to all this tomorrow, and literally she called him out and she's like, you know how many times you said that in the past? So like,
Wow.
this is obviously kind of like a repeatable pattern. So a lot of times, like it's like the combination of things that really kind of like mess people kind of like mentally. So whenever it comes down to like you and people listening to this right now, you need to, again, be honest with yourself of the kind of patterns that you're creating into your lifestyle. And if you're working with somebody, don't try to kind of prove or to show what like something pretty, like, don't be ashamed of like showing like what you eat. And if you have worked with somebody that judge your decisions and judge your eating habits, and obviously that's the person that you shouldn't really be even in touch with, because you can't really be, specifically with working with a coach, it's you can't work with somebody that judges you for the again, the decisions that you're making. Because if that's the case, then you're always going to feel shameful of even saying something. So you're always going to try to show the prettier version, kind of like the highlight. It's kind of like Instagram. When you're working with a coach, it's kind of like you're showing only like the highlights on Instagram. You're not really showing what's kind of happening behind the scenes. The fact that you actually kind of sneak up and like had an entire bag of chocolates, but you chose not to just even disclose it because you're just so guilty about it, right? So those are the kind of things that, and then you obviously sometimes even say like, oh, this is not working. Well, because you're lying to yourself in many of the different things that you're doing on a daily basis. And that obviously is a problem. So,
yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that because I was speaking with a client the other day and she's like, oh yeah, this week I ate this food, and then I had McDonald's. And I was like, what? And she's like,
Why'd you whisper?
I had McDonald's. And I'm like, okay, awesome. You had McDonald's. And she's like, you're not going to yell at me? And I was like, no, why would I yell at you? She's like, because like you're about diets and you're a dietitian. I'm like, well, I'm not about diets, but let's talk about this. Like, your kids eat McDonald's, right? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, you're probably going to be eating McDonald's with your kids, at least for the rest of their kid life or even over that, right? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, so then we have to include McDonald's into your life. The more we resist, the more it persists, the more we take it away. And if you don't tell me what you're eating, the less I can help you. So we need this relationship to be completely open, and we need to find a way to fit McDonald's into your diet. Because if that's what you like and your kids love chicken nuggets, I'm not going to stop them because chicken nuggets are friggin' delicious. All right. So if someone tells you they're not, they're probably lying.
yeah.
Only with the spicy mustard, though. All the other dip sauces are trash.
Wow. We could have a fight about this.
Let's go, dude.
But in all honesty, you have to include the foods that you love. So Andres, to your guy, he's got to include Doritos. To the woman, Big Macs, whatever. And it's tough, right? People want to be kind of like militarized, like told you can't have that to be successful. And we're coming in saying you can have that.
Well, Jordan Syed did I think, I don't know if you guys saw that challenge.
Yeah,
he did the McDonald's challenge, the Big Mac challenge. Right? And I think and I brought him into a podcast and he basically explained like the whole entire thing and how he did it. And the point that he was trying to prove, he lost like 9 pounds doing it because, again, what was he doing? He was having a Big Mac for every lunch. He wasn't really having the fries, or not necessarily that's bad. It's just like he was just having the Big Mac.
And
he
a
was
diet
still
soda,
having
right?
And a diet. I don't know.
Or was it
I
actual soda?
I don't know. So I think it was just like the burger. I feel like you would just always like, so maybe sometimes he was doing something else. But the point is like he was like, and he told me he was doing every day. Like he was getting 10,000 steps a day. He was like working out. He was still getting enough protein. He wasn't really tracking calories. He was just simply like doing all the different things. He knew that a Big Mac contains about 480 or 580 calories or something like that. So he knew kind of how to fit that in. And he lost like 7 to 8 pounds or so in the course of like 30 days or like 2 months or something like this. So it's just to speak to the fact that, you know, people don't have to fear foods. They just need to make sure that they are true to themselves and not necessarily create shame around their choices, but figure out a way that they can kind of have flexibility. And that is, when it comes down to calorie deficit creation, is what kind of creates adherence and sustainability. And the last thing I wanted to kind of talk about before we kind of wrap it up is, are you supposed to be in a calorie deficit forever? Which is another big kind of part of it, that it's, you know, people feel like they have to be losing weight for like a crazy amount, like, you know, for forever. And I had a conversation with one of our clients who also is part of our team, Roxy, which she has been working with me for over a year. And I've told her, I was like, you know, you're not supposed to be in a calorie deficit 365 days a year. In fact, most people never are. They just try to be because they just try to find something different. So they go into calorie deficit for a specific amount of time, they lose the weight, but then they gain it back up. So it just kind of like creates this unhealthy balance. So instead, it's finding something that's sustainable, but there could be periods of time throughout the year in which you can actually be a little bit more loose and obviously how you're, you know, managing your nutrition. And you don't have to necessarily be like me, for example. Like right now, I'm not on a calorie deficit, but if I needed to be able to achieve a specific goal, I would probably put myself through it for a specific amount of time. But that's the thing, like a big kind of misconception that many people think that, you know, you have to be on it all the time or every single day in order for you to be able to achieve your goals, when in reality, it's not always like that.
I would 100% agree with that. You should not be in a calorie deficit 24/7. And as someone who's been a past dieter, who's struggled with weight his whole life, I thought I had to be. I was always jumping on fasting, always jumping on clean eating, always jumping on low carb, and never really giving myself a chance to be like, hey, you don't need to do this every day, right? Like you need to actually give your body a break, and then winter bulk, and then the summer lean, right? Like that's when you bulk up, winter's coming, time to eat more carbs. And I remember the first time I tracked my macros, I didn't even understand what I was doing. Like I was doing If It Fits Your Macros, and I was eating a ton more carbs. I'm like, oh, I gained weight because I ate carbs. But it was like, was I really doing that? Or was it because I was eating more and then also including my cheat days on weekends and making the weekend the reason why? But really understand that you don't need to do it forever, and you shouldn't do it forever, because at the end of the day, how many women have we worked with that have lost their period, right? Because they haven't been eating enough and they're always on a calorie deficit. How many guys, we spoke about this on other podcasts, just lose their sex drive, right? So we're talking about low testosterone because you're always on a calorie deficit. And that's not something we want anyone to be on. And these are some of the signs and symptoms that if you do calorie deficits or try to diet for a long time, this is how they show up. This isn't going to happen after a week or a month, right? But if you do it in such a long time, your body's going to respond.
Yep. I agree 100%.
Yep.
So I think it's just kind of creating seasons. And as we advance, for example, people in our programs, they get to a point where we're just like, okay, you know what? Like this is, we're going to work on this, and then we're going to work on this, and then we're going to work on that. You know, so they have a better idea. I think, like, you know, obviously kind of painting the vision of what you want your year to look like, and what are some of the things that you really want to be focusing on at a specific time. It kind of creates more clarity and more, like, your goals are always kind of like changing. And then whenever your goals change, and you typically adjust your nutrition accordingly to that. I think that's like the bigger thing. But to people to get to that point, it takes a while, you know, so.
Yeah, it usually floors people when it's like, hey, this is going to take about 9 months to a year. You got to be okay with that. And they're like, shit.
Yeah, people just like don't have realistic expectations of what it takes. But if you set them up from the beginning, I think it's just, it kind of like, it creates a difference. And, you know, it didn't take you 3 months to get to where you're at. It took you a lot more than that. So to undo all that, or to kind of get to a point where you're just obviously getting that confidence in what the goals that you're trying to achieve, you can't expect it to be three months. Well, but I did it in the past, and it's like, yep, but here we are having a conversation, right? So obviously if you succeeded on that, like, we wouldn't really be talking right now, you and I, right? So like, you've done it a million different times, but then, you know, again, do you want to do something, the same thing, expecting a different result, or you want to do something different? You know, so that's the thing, that the bigger kind of part of it. So instead of like, you kind of like people listening to us right now, like, instead of kind of going to like the next diet, first of all, understand that any diet that you jump into, try to kind of get you to lose weight, they're all going to follow a calorie deficit approach. You just don't know about it. You're just like essentially putting things into your plate based on like a piece of paper that telling you what to do. But you're creating a calorie deficit, you know? So the question you need to ask yourself is like, can I sustain this? Can I adhere to this long term? So some food for thought, pun intended.
Yeah.
Boom.
Anyways, well, we'll wrap it up here. Any other things to add on your end?
No, I think that's great. Like, what is a calorie deficit? Yeah. I think that was huge. I think it's going to help a lot of people to figure out what a calorie deficit is and how they can get into it, because we gave them 2 strategies. If they're using tracking, just what are they normally eating, and then work from there instead of jumping right onto what an app says. And if you just want to use more intuitive, just look at what you're eating.
Don't use calorie calculators. Like, that's a big thing too. Yeah. Like I have some macro guides that kind of helps people to kind of estimate things based on that. But, you know, even so, like, I think about it right now, I was like, I need to rewrite a lot of those different things, because I feel like it's better for you to be able to like track what you're doing on a weekly basis, and then like figure out exactly where you're at. Okay, you can do some calculations and figure out, okay, this is maybe what you need to be, but is there like a big difference between those 2 numbers? It's like, if so, like, you may be too dramatic to make a change or leap like that. So that's something else that can really kind of help. I'm going to do a TikTok on that, now that I think about it.
Do it.
Anyways, thank you guys so much for being here today. Let me know if you're listening to this and you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you leave a review. We would love that. And if you want to get in touch with any of us, make sure you follow our social media channels, which you're going to find in the show notes. Once again, thank you guys for listening to another Viva Nutrition Radio episode. See you guys next week.